Here comes Saturday night, the history, the tradition, the spectacle, the excitement, the passion, the drama, the fight. It'll be Army, Notre Dame, presented by Discover. He's Brady Quinn, Fox Sports college football analyst, Big Noon kickoff host, also a co-host, Two Pros and a Cup of Joe, former Notre Dame quarterback. Big Noon kickoff just outside the shoe. The undefeated Hoosiers against Ohio State pregame airs every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern on Fox. Before I get to the game, let me ask you about weather. You saw the weather last night. Wait, what are you saying?
I need more energy from you for that read about my Fighting Irish playing in Yankee Stadium. Look, this is the 100-year anniversary of the first consensus national championship. The four horsemen there dating back to 1924. I need more energy from you this morning for this matchup.
Damn. Yeah, but America's rooting for Army.
Yeah, and I do every single day with the exception of that slotted amount of time, all right, where my Fighting Irish are playing Army. But every other moment of my life, I'm rooting for Army, Navy. The toughest one for me is picking between Army and Navy. But I've gotten to know Coach Monken a little bit better, so I side more with Army, even though my dad was a Marine. So
okay, but you got the American flag behind you. You're a patriot, and you're rooting for Notre Dame.
That's all it takes. It just takes an American flag.
Yes, that's it.
You must be a patriot.
Okay, here comes the history, the tradition, the spectacle, the excitement, the passion, the drama, the fight. Army, Notre Dame. You good?
Hey, that's the Dan Patrick I know.
Okay, all right.
That I grew up with all that excitement, man.
I'm going to be watching Big Noon Kickoff, and I'm going to be texting you when I feel like you don't have that energy level. So just, you better, every day Super Bowl, Brady, you better bring it on Saturday.
I try to, man. I try to.
Okay. All right. Fair
that's
enough.
all stuff's about, right? You got to bring the energy to people.
Yes. Okay. Before I get to the games, playing in weather like the Browns and the Steelers did last night, you're an Ohio guy, but advantage, disadvantage, help me understand that from a quarterbacking perspective, playing in weather like that.
It's always about your grip, everything that impacts your grip. So it could be weather, right? Or snow in this case, where there's a little bit of wetness, or really the cold. I mean, the biggest thing about it is when it's cold, you can't feel your extremities as well. All right. That's obvious. But where that impacts you the most is your grip on the football and how you feel the ball spinning off your fingertips. And then where that becomes even more impactful is when you have wind, which there was about, I think, 15 miles per hour up to maybe 20 with some gusts. Then you're not able to spin the ball as well. If you can't spin the ball as well, it's harder to cut through the wind, especially in that stadium there in Cleveland, where there tends to be a more significant wind through the, I think, east side of the end zone, if I remember correct. So that's where it comes into, where you're a little less accurate throwing the football if you're not spinning it quite as well because you can't grip it quite as well. So you see some guys wear a glove. I could never get comfortable wearing a glove. It felt like, as far as your release point, it changes a little bit because it's grippier. So you're going to be releasing it or holding onto the football a little more than you're used to. So unless you practice it and get comfortable with it, it's hard to put one on, then take it off and try to throw. It feels weird on your hand.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Ross Tucker. I'll give you the first pick of any defensive player in the NFL.
I mean, it's hard not to pick Myles Garrett. I think last night is an example of that. Although last year, I think TJ Watt had a pretty good argument to be made about winning Defensive Player of the Year. But Myles Garrett, to me, is the scariest human being in the NFL that is rushing off of the edge. And I think anyone who's met him in person or seen him, he's an absolute Adonis. So I would probably say right now, if you had to pick amongst all the defensive players, it probably was Aaron Donald. I'd now say right now it's Myles Garrett.
But is Myles Garrett treated differently? Is he blocked differently than the other guys? Because it sounded like what he was saying is, hey, they game plan for me, but it doesn't matter. I'm still number one. I don't know if TJ Watt or Micah Parsons are treated with the same respect as Myles Garrett.
I would say last night when you're watching it, you see TJ Watt treated with a very similar respect. I mean, there's clearly a directive out to say, hey, wherever he's at, make sure we've at least got two guys on him. We want to try to put four hands on him at all times. So I felt like last night was an example of TJ Watt getting some of that Myles Garrett treatment. But there's some truth to that. I mean, there's more teams. I think there's some teams who look at those matchups up front and they might feel okay about who that tackle is having to win that one-on-one battle. I mean, look, when we had Joe Thomas, we always felt comfortable with whoever was going up against Joe because he was that good of a player. So we could kind of focus on some of the other mismatches we had up front. But it's very rare you have a guy like Joe Thomas who's protecting your left side or your blind side. So it all depends. I honestly think when I watch film of both those guys, I think it's pretty equal as far as the amount of attention that TJ Watt and Myles Garrett gets. The difference for a guy like Micah Parsons is when you can move them around, it makes that job so much more difficult. So inherently, they're not going to get the same treatment because you're not going to play Myles Garrett off the ball. Like, at least if you do, it's the dumbest thing in the world a defensive coordinator could do. I think every single time I see a defensive coordinator drop like a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett or whoever you're talking about off of the edge into coverage, I'm like, thank God. Like, yeah, one of the best edge rushers trying to be in pass coverage. Like, yeah, of course. Like, give our offensive line, give us a little bit of a break up front. Thank you for that.
Help me understand this time of the year where you have quarterbacks who are flipping. So you just had Bryce Underwood, a Michigan kid, was going to LSU. Now he's going back to Michigan. You have the situation with USC with Julian Lewis. They lose him to Colorado. Does this just come down to money now?
Pretty much. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, which, by the way, I'm not sure it ever really was different. We can be open about it now.
It's just above board now.
It's above board, right? It's patriotic. I don't know,
it's America.
It's America. That's right. Capitalism. No, I think that's part of what it is now. I mean, or the majority of what it is. I also think there is something to do with kind of the trends of where those teams are this season. I mean, you look at Colorado, clearly they're ascending. They're the favorites are in the Big 12. If they, win out, they're going to win the Big 12. They're going to be in the playoff. As opposed to Southern Cal, where that's not the case. And it feels like they don't know where that program's at right now. It's like if the buyout wasn't as big for Lincoln Riley, would he still be the head coach? Probably not, based on the performance of what we've seen so far. So I think that plays a factor too into it. Whereas you look at Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be moving on to the NFL, for a young man like Juju Lewis, he's like, dude, I'm going to day one and starting. And I know Coach Prime's going to bring guys in to surround me with talent. He did that with Shedeur. He's going to do that with Juju Lewis. For Bryce Underwood, it's probably more about opportunity. This is a team that just won the national championship a year ago. And somehow, some way, over that long list of quarterbacks they have on the roster, they don't have a guy who can play at the level that J.J. McCarthy did. And if you're not playing at that high of a level like J.J. McCarthy did, you're not competing for a national championship. So it's easier to then pitch that to a guy who can come in and be your savior. And you look at the excitement from the Michigan fan base. So yes, it's money, but there's also those factors too that I think play a part in, the opportunity to play, and also right away probably even get paid more. Because once he goes there and once he shows what he's capable of, Bryce Underwood's going to be making even more money.
I'm trying to understand this Deion Sanders. Maybe he could be a package deal with Shedeur Sanders. Well, what you're saying is you have to have a team get Shedeur Sanders and then fire their coach if you're like it. It doesn't make any. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a high draft pick. How are you getting, unless it's the Raiders or the Giants? I don't know if the Giants would ever do something like that. Or hey, he could coach the Cowboy. I'm trying to figure this out of, is there a scenario where Deion would coach his son in the NFL?
I don't know. I mean, the Raiders are the ones that make the most logistical sense from that standpoint, because you really would have to hire Deion first and then draft Shedeur because the timing of all of it. But you first have to be in a position.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets complicated and tricky. And unless you're a team that's at the top of the draft board, it's going to be really hard to pull that all off. So Las Vegas would be the only team that I think could make some sense in that regard. And look, I mean, I think Coach Prime has been pretty open about where he's at and wanting to stay in Colorado and build this thing. And I know there's a portion of it where you have to say that too, because this is that time of year where you're recruiting and you're trying to build up this team and you don't know what the future holds. So you have to say all those things until you're presented with a different opportunity. Because I think the most fascinating thing about, Coach Prime and moving forward is the question of, well, it's worked so far where he's coached his sons moving all the way up. And so it'd be incredible to think that if you did have the opportunity, I mean, no one would blame Coach Prime, I think, if he did have the opportunity to take that opportunity to go coach his son in the NFL. It'd be the craziest thing we've ever seen. And I think if you look at his track record, he's always been able to kind of build up these programs from his time coaching in high school to, smaller college football now to a Power Four program. So I think you got to give him the benefit of the doubt because of his track record, but also just the unique story that is. I mean, we've been applauding for the Lakers and LeBron James and Bronny and that whole situation. This is like taking that up a notch too, to one of the more iconic brands if it was the Raiders in this scenario.
He's Brady Quinn. Big noon kickoff crew will be set up just outside the shoe in Columbus. It'll be Indiana, Ohio State pregame. Airs every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern on Fox.
When can we be in there for a game? Like, when can we see and bring in person, bring the boys?
We're a big deal. We're a big deal.
We have the Black Keys playing this week. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff going on. I think you'd enjoy it.
Are they Ohio guys?
They are Ohio guys.
Are they like Bowling Green or something? I don't know where they're from. For some reason, like Toledo or Akron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like calling people Ohio guys? I feel like there's a lot of that going on,
I'm an Ohio guy, but I don't go, yeah, you're an Ohio guy. I mean, I'm from Cincinnati, so it's a little higher end than the other places in Ohio. Like, just
so it didn't get the nickname the Nasty Natty for any specific reason. It's just okay.
Hello, me.
There you go.
Yeah. Where was I? Okay, how does Indiana win this game?
So these matchups to me are all about game flow, and I think when I've been in Columbus at the shoe for a game where teams have gone in and won, it's happened in a couple of different ways. When we saw Oregon do it a few years back, it was really about kind of getting on top, staying on top. Like, they immediately almost took the crowd out of the game, and that place can be one of the loudest venues. It probably doesn't get credit for how loud it is. But that's one of the ways, is like going in right away, not being like overcome with emotion or not, reading into the crowd, having a bunch of pre-snap penalties, executing, going right down the field, marching down the field and scoring. And that shuts a lot of people up. That's one way. I think you have to win the trenches. I mean, if you look at the Achilles heel of Ohio State, it's their offensive line. If you look at the way Michigan's beat them the past 3 years, it's been the O-line, D-line, and that winning that physicality, that matchup. It seems like that's always a question about a Ryan Day football team. Now, look, I think this team is as physical and as good up front on defense as they've been. Now, offense, they've had a bunch of different injuries. And you've got Carson Hinsman going back to center, and Sarah Veld going to left guard, and Donovan Jackson left guard going to left tackle. So there's a lot of musical chairs there. But if they control both offense, defensive line, I think their skilled position players are good enough to be able to make enough big plays and run the football well enough to keep this thing tight. And so if they keep the crowd out of it, control the line of scrimmage, and then just make enough plays during that fourth quarter, I think that's how they win. I don't see a scenario where Indiana blows out Ohio State. I see it more where Ohio State could blow out Indiana. But I do see a scenario where it's a tight game down the end, and Curtis Rourke makes enough little back shoulder fades passes, they can make something happen there to get the win.
Indiana 10-point underdog, Army 14-point underdog. More likely to pull off the win, Army, Notre Dame, neutral field, or Indiana at Ohio State?
Oh, Indiana. There's no shot for Army. I'm sorry. Notre Dame's got one of the best defenses in the country. There's a skill mismatch, a significant one at best. And I also think, people always talk about like Indiana's lack of strength of schedule. Look at Army's. And you can maybe make that case too about Notre Dame's this year with the way it's turned out. But they've responded since the loss to Northern Illinois, and they've continued to put a beat down on teams. So I don't think this thing will even be close. And I think the prep too of playing the Naval Academy early helps a little bit too with seeing a lot of similar schemes, being disciplined with your eyes, disciplined defense. So I think it's going to be a home run, if you will, in Yankee Stadium for the Fighting Irish.
Oh, I see what you did. Yeah, a little baseball terminology there. You get a buzz cut if Army wins this game.
Oh, no. All right. I will bet that. I feel so confident about it.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you got good moss. I don't know. You're going to, wow.
Thank you.
That breaks some hearts, if you got your hair cut there.
Hey, if it has to happen, it has to happen.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet this for my Fighting Irish. That's how confident I am in the board.
Great to talk to you, and have fun. Are people... Like, did they get over? How long did it take them to get over the fact that you didn't play at Ohio State, but you're from Columbus?
I almost went to Michigan.
And my God.
Yeah, that's usually the toughest
thing.
thing.
Yeah, you told me the Bo Schembechler recruiting story.
Well, I had a guy on a flight recently, like they were having an issue with like one of my bags, and there was a whole thing. The guy goes, "Well, it's because you didn't play at Ohio State." And then I kind of turned around, I looked at him, and I go, "Yeah, I almost went to Michigan." And then he kind of looked at me, but didn't say anything. I go, "Yeah, how have the last 3 years been, pal?" Like that's the thing about it is,
Wow.
yeah, the truth of the matter is, it was a great place. I loved Ohio State. It just wasn't the right fit for me. Had that been, nowadays, who knows if my decision would have been any different. But the reality is, you do get that a lot. But I'm also like, yeah, people don't understand. I was like that close to going to Michigan too.
Well, also back then was Ohio State a passing team? I mean,
No,
they become wide receiver you, but like nowadays or the last few years, you're like, hell yes. These weapons?
and that was one of the biggest reasons why when I looked at what at that time I was obviously a huge, I was a big Tom Brady fan. And he had come from Michigan, and that was kind of their pitch, more of a pro style offense. Notre Dame at the time had a West Coast offense from Denny Green's system with Ty Willingham as the head coach. So that was all very appealing to me. Whereas when I watched Ohio State win the national championship that year, I think Craig Krenzel threw the football like 15, 16 times. So it was kind of hard watching in that biggest moment to think, well, if I'm the guy, I'm probably going to be handing it off more often than not, which it played a little bit of a factor too.
Say it with excitement. Brady, Quinn, and the Big Noon Kickoff crew just outside the shoe in Columbus. It's Indiana, Ohio State. Pre-game show every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern on Fun.
Oh, God.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Have fun.
I will.
Play nice. Brady, Quinn. All right, we'll take a break. Phone calls coming up after this.